I drove 8 hours in a storm to surprise Mom for her 65th birthday. Upon entering, I heard, "I hope he crashes." They laughed, but what I did next wiped the smiles off their faces. My name is William. I'm 35 years old, a self-made millionaire living in San Francisco where the steep streets and morning fog are part of my life. I run a tech company specializing in artificial intelligence, which has taken me from a poor boy in a small town to the peak of my career. My penthouse overlooks the harbor, filled with light and luxury, but sometimes feels strangely empty. I have success, money, everything, but what I've always yearned for is the warmth of family. I grew up in a small town, an 8-hour drive from San Francisco. My parents were factory workers, so when I was young, our family life was always strained by scarcity. My childhood was full of dark nights without electricity, frugal meals with only potatoes and vegetables. At 18, I left my hometown, entered university on a scholarship, and started building everything from scratch. Now, I regularly send money to support my parents, cover all their expenses, and help Jack, my younger brother, have a house, a car, and a stable job. I do all this out of a sense of duty, and deep down, I always hope that one day my family will be proud of me. But all my efforts were shattered on my mother's 65th birthday. That day, it was pouring rain. The drops hammered against the windshield as if they could break through it. The howling wind mixed with the sound of the tires slipping on the wet road. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my eyes straining to see the blurry road ahead. The car clock showed 6 p.m., but the sky was completely black, like midnight. I had driven 8 hours from San Francisco to the small town where my parents live. The winding road and relentless storm never ceased. The birthday cake I had prepared all afternoon was safe in its box on the passenger seat. The faint aroma of butter lingered in my jacket pocket. There was a box containing a gold necklace adorned with pearls, a gift I carefully chose for my mother's birthday. I smiled, imagining how her face would light up when she saw me walk in after so many months away. But this storm seemed to want to swallow every plan. The road was slippery, the car swayed a couple of times, and my heart skipped a beat. At some points, I wondered if I was crazy for driving in this weather, but then I thought of my mother, the years of sacrifice she made, and I pressed the accelerator, moving forward. The closer I got to town, the faster my heart beat with excitement. I imagined the family gathered, my father laughing loudly, Jack teasing me as always. I had planned a whole week baking the cake, choosing the gift, driving back even though my company was overflowing with work, all to create a memorable moment. But the sky didn't cooperate. The rain intensified, the roads flooded, and I arrived later than expected. When the town sign appeared in the glow of my headlights, the clock showed almost 9 p.m. I let out a sigh of relief and slowed down. My mother's house was at the end of a dirt road behind a row of trees. I turned off the engine and sat in the car for a moment, listening to the constant drumming of the rain on the roof. My breathing calmed. I had made it. I was home. Getting out of the car, the rain lashed my face with its coldness. Holding the cake box carefully, I protected it with my jacket. The necklace was safe in my pocket, and I touched it to make sure it was still there. The house glowed with a warm light, and laughter and conversations came from the living room. I stopped, looking through the window. My father was sitting in an armchair, my mother was wearing a birthday paper hat, and Jack was telling a story animatedly, waving his hands. The family was happy, unaware of my arrival. Perfect. This was my chance to surprise them. I went around to the back door and entered the kitchen. It wasn't locked. My mother still kept her old habits. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the faint glow from the living room. I placed the cake box on the table and opened it. The cake was still impeccable, with smooth buttercream frosting and "Happy Birthday, Mom" written in chocolate. I smiled proudly. Baking wasn't my forte, but I had spent the entire previous night perfecting it. I was sure my mother would love it. I took candles out of my bag and placed them on the cake, forming the number 65. Then I took out the necklace box and carefully tied a red ribbon around it. Everything had to be perfect. I imagined my mother opening the gift, hugging me, and the whole family laughing together. I lit the lighter, ready to light the candles, but then I froze. The voices from the living room became clearer. My mother, my father, and Jack were saying something, their tones more serious than before. Curiosity got the better of me, and I stealthily approached the kitchen door, staying in the shadows, listening. William still hasn't arrived at this hour, with this rain and slippery roads. Something bad could happen. My father's voice was low but had a chilling edge. My mother let out a soft sigh. What if something happened to him? Well, the fortune, the house, the company, everything would come to us. That wouldn't be so bad. I stood motionless, my heart as if squeezed by an invisible hand. Had I heard wrong? Then Jack's voice cut through the air, filled with a hint of contempt. He thinks I just need a place to live, a car, a mediocre job. But I don't want just those things. He doesn't even realize that his company is worth hundreds of millions. If something happened to him, who wouldn't see me as the rightful heir? The blood in my veins seemed to turn to ice. My head was spinning. Those words from my father, my mother, my own brother, were like knives cutting my heart. They wanted me dead. They wanted me gone so they could take everything. The family bond, the years I sacrificed, the times I sent money and helped them, it was all a joke to them. I looked at the cake on the table, the unlit candles, the necklace in its box gleaming faintly under the dim light. I had driven through a storm, carrying love and dedication, only to hear these words. The truth was so cruel, so brutal, that all I could do was stand still. I wanted to burst in, confront them, break something, but I couldn't. I just stood there, in the flickering light of the kitchen. I couldn't face them, not now. I didn't want them to see me. I didn't want them to know I had heard everything. I placed the cake box and the gift neatly on the kitchen table. The necklace was there, like a silent farewell. I extinguished the lighter and put it in my pocket. I no longer needed candles. I no longer needed surprises. I opened the back door and stepped outside. The rain was still falling, icy cold, but I felt nothing. I walked to the car, slid into the driver's seat, and closed the door. My clothes and hair were soaked, but I didn't care. I looked at the house one last time. The lights were still shining and the laughter continued to resonate. They didn't know I had come and I didn't want them to know. I drove away, driving aimlessly. The streets of the town were blurred by the rain. Then I stopped at a small roadside motel and rented a room. The owner looked at me and asked why I looked so tired. I gave him a slight smile and said I had driven very far. The room was simple, the bed hard, but I didn't care. I sat down and looked out the window. The rain continued to fall as if it wanted to wash everything away. I took out my phone and saw a message from my mother. "Where are you? The roads are bad, be careful." I stared at the message and let out a bitter chuckle. Be careful. They wanted me dead, but they still pretended to care. I didn't reply. I lay down on the hard motel bed, staring at the stained ceiling. The sound of the rain was constant outside the window. I couldn't sleep. The words of my father, mother, and Jack echoed in my mind, sharp as knives. And then came the memories of my childhood, like an old and faded movie, blurry but obsessive. I remembered my early days when our family lived in a dilapidated wooden house in town. The roof leaked, and every time it rained, my mother put buckets on the floor to catch the water. My father worked at the factory, my mother took sewing jobs, but there was never enough money. Dinner was often just boiled potatoes or watery soup. I, a skinny child, was always hungry but didn't dare ask for more. Eat less, this house is not a charity, my father would tell me when I looked at the plate of potatoes. My mother didn't say anything, just lowered her head. Jack, a little boy then, would receive an extra slice of bread from her. Although I was the older brother, I excelled in school, always among the top of my class, but my parents never praised me. What good is studying? You're still a burden, my mother once told me in a bitter voice. I gritted my teeth, vowing to escape poverty. At 18, I won a scholarship to a university in San Francisco. The day I left, my father only said, "Don't come back if you don't have money." Jack, then 13, smiled and said, "Go and get good things so I can eat more." My mother said nothing, simply handing me a backpack in silence. I fended for myself in the city, working every possible job: dishwasher, delivery man, teaching assistant, to cover expenses. I never received a word from my family. On the nights I stayed up studying, I thought of my mother, wishing she would be proud one day. But every time I called home, they only asked, "Do you have money? Send us something." I would grit my teeth and send what I could, even when I was surviving on instant noodles. Now, lying in the cold motel room, I realized that I was never their son. In their eyes, I was just a tool, a source of money. Tears rolled down my face, and for the first time that night, I allowed myself to cry, not for them, but for myself, the boy who once believed that family could overcome anything. The rain subsided and dawn arrived, although the sky remained gray. I sat up and looked at myself in the wall mirror, red and swollen eyes, deep dark circles. I was no longer the William of yesterday, the one who drove through a storm with a hopeful smile. I was someone else now, betrayed, hurt, but still strong enough to get up. I thought about the years since I became a millionaire. My tech company, born from a crazy idea in a college dorm room, had grown into a business worth hundreds of millions. I had a penthouse, cars, business trips around the world. But I never forgot my family. I wanted them to live well, to compensate for those days of poverty. I sent my parents $10,000 monthly, enough for them to live comfortably. I paid all their electricity, water, property taxes, house maintenance, and any other expenses. I cleared their bank debts, bought them a new car, and remodeled the old wooden house to turn it into a decent home. Every time I visited them, I saw my mother smile, my father pat me on the shoulder, and I thought I did it. They're happy. Jack was another story. He didn't go to college, he wandered around for a few years, then asked me for help. I didn't hesitate for a moment. I used my contacts to get him a good job at a bank. When he wanted to buy a house, I sent him the down payment. The sports car he drove, I paid for that too. I thought it was my duty as his older brother, even though Jack never said thank you. But now everything was clear. My family didn't value me, they only valued my money. I stood up and opened the window. A cold breeze hit my face as if waking me up. I had sacrificed too much and only received deceit in return. I clenched my fists. It was time for a change. My phone vibrated on the table. I looked at the screen. It was Mom calling. My heart tightened. Part of me wanted to yell at her over the phone and demand how they could be so cruel. But I breathed deeply, answered, and kept my voice calm. "Hello, Mom. Where are you?" I saw the cake and the gift on the kitchen table. "Why did you come and go without saying anything?" Her voice was sweet, as if she hadn't said those words last night. I gripped the phone tightly, forcing myself to remain calm. The company had an urgent matter, so I had to leave immediately. "I didn't want to ruin your birthday." "Oh, yes," she paused, and then continued, "The necklace is beautiful." "It must have been expensive, right?" "Always so considerate. But next time, stay and eat cake with me." "Yes," I let out a bitter chuckle, making sure she didn't hear it. Considerate. They wanted me dead, and they were still acting sweet. "Sure, next time," I said in a cold voice. "I'm busy now, Mom. Rest well." I hung up before she could say more. The phone fell onto the bed, and I slumped down, holding my head in my hands. Her words were like salt on an open wound. They didn't know I had heard everything. They didn't know I had seen their true faces. And I wanted it to stay that way, at least for now. I looked out the window. The small town was quiet, but it was no longer home to me. I thought about the sacrifices, the calls to check on them, the hopes that my family would love me. It had all crumbled. But amidst the pain, a spark shone. I no longer needed them. I could live for myself. I stood up and packed my things. I wouldn't go back to that house. But before leaving town, I needed someone to talk to, someone who understood me. Aunt Laura, my mother's older sister, lived a few miles away. She always treated me like her own son. I got in the car and drove without looking back. The road to Aunt Lara's house was uneven, flanked by fields of withered grass under a gray sky. I drove slowly, my heart heavy. Aunt Laura, my mother's older sister, was the only person I trusted when I was a child. Every time my parents scolded me, I would run to her house, sit by the fireplace, and listen to her stories. She wasn't rich, she lived modestly in a small house, but she always made me feel safe. I parked in front of her garden. Aunt Laura was watering plants in the garden, her silver hair neatly tied up. Seeing me, she dropped the watering can, ran towards me, and hugged me tightly. "William, what a surprise visit. You look very tired." Her voice was warm, but her eyes reflected concern as they met mine. We sat in her living room with steaming mugs in front of us. I told her everything: the storm, the cake, the gift, and the cruel words of my father, my mother, and Jack. I talked about my poor childhood, the years of sacrifice, and my mother's fake call this morning. My voice trembled, but I didn't cry. Aunt Laura listened, her hands tightly gripping the mug, her eyes filling with tears. When I finished, she sighed. "William, I'm not surprised. My little sister, your mother, has always been greedy. Even as a child, she fought for toys, for money, for everything. I let her have her way because we were sisters, but I always knew she would never change. As for your father and Jack, their greed has blinded them. But you deserve love, not to be used." She took my hand, her voice firm. "Listen to me, William. Toxic people, even family, don't deserve your sacrifices. Cut ties with them. Live for yourself." Her words were like a gust of wind dissipating the fog in my mind. I nodded, feeling relief for the first time in hours. I left Aunt Lara's house when the sun began to set. Her words resonated in my mind. Live for yourself. As I drove back to San Francisco, I watched the vast fields, feeling like I was leaving a part of my past behind. I was no longer the William of yesterday, the one who clung to false hopes about family. I was a new person, willing to set boundaries. I thought about everything I had given: money, time, affection, all poured into a bottomless pit. I remembered the endless nights working when I started my company, cutting personal expenses to send money home. I remembered how many times Jack called asking for more money, and how I always agreed, believing that was brotherly love. But now I saw clearly that I owed them nothing. I didn't need to buy family with money. A decision came with dazzling clarity. I would review all financial support. The $10,000 monthly payments would stop. I would continue to cover basic expenses like electricity, water, maintenance, as a way to honor my parents' role in raising me. As for Jack, my brother, he would have to fend for himself. I wasn't his bank. As the city lights appeared in the distance, I felt free. The weight of family no longer oppressed my shoulders. I lowered the car window, letting in the cool night air. I smiled, not out of joy, but because I knew I was on the right path. My life, from that moment on, would be mine. Back in San Francisco, I threw myself into work, but I didn't allow the pain to drown me. I called the company accountant and asked him to review the monthly transfers to my parents. "Stop the $10,000 payments starting next month," I said calmly. The accountant was surprised, but didn't ask questions. 3 weeks later, my mother called. I anticipated it. "William, why didn't we receive the money this month? Did you forget?" Her voice was sweet, but I sensed the anxiety underneath. "The company is going through difficult times, Mom," I replied calmly. "I'll only cover basic expenses like electricity and water. You and Dad will have to manage the rest." It was a lie, but I felt no guilt. My company was still thriving, but I didn't want them to know that. Her tone changed, becoming sharp and accusing. "You're so rich, and now you're stingy with your own parents. We raised you, and now you turn your back on us." I gripped the phone tightly, but didn't lose my composure. I had prepared for this moment. "Mom, I've done enough. Now I need to take care of myself," I said and hung up. The phone vibrated incessantly with messages full of reproaches. I didn't read them. Jack called a few days later, his voice full of flattery. "Brother, I need some cash for furniture. Just this time, help me." I let out a bitter laugh. "Jack, fend for yourself. I'm not an ATM." I hung up. For the first time, I felt strong and free. Sitting in my penthouse, contemplating the San Francisco Bay shining under the moon, I understood that I had set boundaries. My parents, Jack, no longer had control over me. I opened my computer and began to plan my new life. A trip perhaps, or a charity project, something for me, not for them. A month passed, and my parents remained silent, probably thinking I would change my mind. But in the second month, my phone started vibrating nonstop. It wasn't their numbers, but other unknown ones, probably Mom using a neighbor's phone. I didn't answer. Messages arrived. Mom's tone was a mix of anger and pleading. "William, you can't do this to your parents. We're family." I deleted them immediately, my heart no longer aching as before. A few months later, Aunt Laura called me with an update. My parents had fallen into financial difficulties. Without the monthly payment I gave them, they couldn't maintain their lavish lifestyle. The car my father bought the previous year, his pride and joy, was repossessed by the bank because they couldn't keep up with the payments. The vacations abroad, the compulsive shopping at the malls, all gone. My mother complained to the neighbors, calling me inconsiderate. But Aunt Laura said that everyone in town knew what I had done for them. "They brought this on themselves, William," she told me. "Don't feel guilty." Jack wasn't doing any better either. He called me a few times, begging for money, alternating between flattery and irritation. "Brother, I just need $5,000. I'm in a bind." I flatly refused. "Earn it yourself, Jack." He cursed and hung up. Aunt Laura told me that Jack had been fired from the bank for laziness and was now living on loans. The house I helped him buy was for sale to cover his debts. It didn't surprise me. Jack never valued what I gave him. From afar, I saw how the consequences were catching up with them, not because I stopped providing for them, but because they had built their lives on greed. I still covered their basic expenses, electricity, water, taxes, so they wouldn't be homeless, but that was my last line. I would no longer be an infinite source of money. For the first time, I felt that I wasn't responsible for them. They had to face themselves, just as I did. I thought the family problems were resolved, but no. My parents weren't going to give up. During an intense workday, I was in the middle of a boardroom, presenting our company's expansion plan to the Asian market before 10 key shareholders. The graphs shown on the screen, my voice firm and confident. It was a moment I had prepared for months. But then the boardroom door burst open. My assistant, Lisa, entered with a pale face. "William, you have to come now to reception." "Your parents are making a scene," she whispered. My heart sank, but I maintained my composure. "My apologies to everyone. I need to attend to an urgent matter." "We'll return in 10 minutes," I said. The shareholders nodded, some exchanging curious glances as I left the room. Downstairs in the lobby, I found chaos. My father was in the middle of a group of employees, pointing and yelling, his voice booming like thunder. "William, ungrateful son. So rich, and allowing his parents to starve." My mother was beside him, crying. "He's stingy, he refuses to send money, and leaves us living like beggars." The employees murmured, some taking out their phones to record. The clients at the reception desk watched. The more people watched, the more my parents seemed to revel in it, as if they were acting out a play to humiliate me. I approached, my heart pounding, but my face remained cold. "Dad, Mom, calm down. Let's talk in my office," I tried to say calmly, but my mother interrupted me, pointing her finger at me. "Talk? You turned your back on us, and now pretend to be courteous in front of your employees." My father made a face of contempt. "Look at this big boss who can't even face his own parents." The crowd fell silent, all eyes fixed on me. I knew what they were thinking. William Blake, self-made millionaire, being confronted by his own parents. But I wouldn't let them control the narrative. I turned to Lisa and said quietly, "Call the accountant here with the records of all payments made to my family over the years." Lisa nodded and ran to do it. I faced my parents, my voice calm but sharp. "You want to talk about money? Fine, but we'll do it clearly, with evidence." My mother scoffed. "Evidence? All you do is lie." Minutes later, the accounting manager, Sarah, appeared with a thick stack of documents. I took the papers and opened them in front of the crowd. "These are bank statements from the last 5 years," I said, my voice clear and resonant. "I sent you $10,000 monthly, totaling $600,000. I paid Dad's bank loans, bought you a car, renovated your house, covered electricity, water, taxes, totaling over $2 million. I gave Jack money for a house, a car, and a job. You call me stingy? What are these amounts then?" The crowd murmured, this time not because of my parents, but out of disbelief. My mother stammered, You're lying. It can't be that much money." But I raised the statements and handed them to a nearby employee. "Read them aloud. Let everyone hear." He read each figure, meticulously documented. My parents' faces paled. My father took a step back. My mother lowered her head, unable to hold anyone's gaze. I continued, my voice low but firm. "I stopped the monthly payment because I'm not a bank. If you want money, earn it yourselves. If you want to make a scene, I'll take this to court with all the evidence." The crowd was silent. Some nodded in agreement. My parents stood there like actors whose play had ended. My father took my mother's arm, murmuring, "Let's go." They left without looking back, under the curious gazes of the onlookers. I returned to the boardroom, apologized to the shareholders, and resumed the presentation. No one mentioned the incident, but I knew they respected how I handled it. When the meeting ended, Lisa approached and whispered, "William, you were very strong." I smiled slightly. Strong, perhaps, but inside me, a new scar had just formed. After the conflicts and fights with my family, I thought I would feel pain and loneliness. But instead, I experienced an unexpected sense of freedom and peace. I started new habits. I filled the emptiness of my apartment with a bookshelf full of novels, a fragrant kitchen with homemade bread, and photos of my travels. I decided to live for myself without being tied to the past. I invested in genuine relationships. I dined with colleagues who valued my ideas. I joined a charity group that helps disadvantaged children access education, something I longed for in my childhood. One day, I met Anna, a volunteer at the charity center. Her radiant smile and stories about her dream of opening a school for children in remote areas captivated me. I was drawn to her passion. We started talking regularly, without haste, but enough to ignite a new light in my heart. I also rediscovered old hobbies. I learned to cook, experimenting with elaborate dishes like risotto or tiramisu. On weekends, I drove to the outskirts of the city, walked trails, listened to birds and the wind. Those small moments made me feel alive, truly alive. I was no longer the William of the family, nor the William of the company. I was William, a 35-year-old man learning to love himself. The company continued to grow, but I stopped exhausting myself working. I hired more staff, delegated responsibilities, and gave myself time. I planned a trip to Japan to see the cherry blossoms and meditate in a temple. My life was now a canvas that I painted, without anyone else holding the brush. A year had passed since my mother's birthday. Standing on the balcony of my apartment, I watched the city shining with lights. My phone remained silent. There were no more accusatory messages or pleas for money. My parents and Jack had disappeared from my life like a closed chapter. Aunt Laura still called me, sending handwritten cards, reminding me that I had a family, not by blood, but by love. I learned that family love cannot be one-sided. I used to believe that if I tried hard enough, If I gave what was needed, my parents and Jack would love me. But love requires respect. They didn't respect me, they didn't value what I did, and I couldn't continue sacrificing myself for something that would never come. I no longer sought their approval. I found it within myself, in the days I overcame poverty, in the company I built from scratch, in the smiles I brought to the children of the charity center. Anna, now a good friend, once said, "William, you are the strongest person I know, not because of the money, but because you chose to prioritize yourself." Her words linger with me. My new life isn't perfect. Some nights I still dream of my childhood, of the old wooden house, and I wake up feeling empty. But I don't let that drag me down. I've learned to get up, to love myself, and to live according to my values. Today, I'm in a small cafe, writing these words as a way to close the past. I think about my journey from that poor boy they called a burden to the free man who is today in a big city. I remember that stormy night, the birthday cake, and the cruel words that changed everything. But above all, I think about the lesson learned. Boundaries are necessary, even with family. Setting those boundaries wasn't easy. It required facing pain, guilt, and the fear of losing what I once called family. But when I did, I found freedom. Freedom to live authentically, to love without fear of being used, to build a life based on self-respect. I don't hate my parents or Jack. I only regret that they chose greed over family. But I can't change them. I can only change myself. I became my own role model, resilient, self-sufficient, and valuing myself.